Well, we are back with the Practice of the Practice podcast here with Kasey Compton. How you doing today, Kasey?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're doing this $1 Million Practice series here. Yesterday, we covered your purpose, and we've got kind of 5 P's that you've developed: purpose, planning, process, profit, and people. So if you missed yesterday, make sure you go back and listen to that. An awesome interview with Kasey. Today, we're diving into the planning phase. And where should we start, Kasey?
Well, I guess we could start with your favorite word, which is culture.
Oh, culture. Yesterday, I would say, for those that didn't hear yesterday, a culture, I think it's often overused, but it's probably the best word we have for culture. So my favorite word, culture.
Yeah. Just picking up from the purpose was your culture in your company is really going to be a result of your why. And so whatever it is that, whatever your why is, your culture needs to reflect that. And I know that this sounds so silly and you're thinking, why am I wasting my time listening to someone tell me that I should have a good culture? But sometimes we make the mistake of not even being aware of our culture, and we separate ourselves because we're so busy that we don't even really see things that are going on that can affect our company negatively. And so, I think the first step of the planning phase is just evaluate your why and make sure that your culture is evident throughout every aspect of your company.
And when you're planning, are there other kind of bullet points that you want to make sure that people hit on when they're in that planning phase?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Bring the noise, Kasey.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I guess going back just a little bit to culture, knowing that there's not a right way or there's not a wrong way. Personally, I've worked for several different companies and they each have a totally different culture, and one is not good and one is not bad. They're just different. So whatever you decide to be, just embracing that. But I think the next most important thing there is determining what kind of model you're going to use in your company. Are you going to have more of an agency model, paying people an hourly wage, whether they see clients or not? Are you going to have more of a pay for performance type model? Are you going to have more of a split model, an hour? There's lots of options. So just determining the pros and the cons of both models and what's going to work well for you in what your goals are in your company.
Awesome. And then what else with the planning phase do you need to make sure is kind of on your checklist?
Well, okay. So just some simple questions that you'll want to ask yourself. One, just, gosh, there's a bunch. Talking about your community, that's a good place to start. If you're an insurance-based practice, what insurances do most people have in your community? What's the percentage of Medicaid versus commercial? Where do most people go to the doctor? That's a good place to start. What's the largest physicians group that you have? And what insurances do they accept? And what kind of clients do those doctors attract? Knowing your market is a huge deal, especially if you're looking to scale a practice. And I say that because with me in Somerset, the last time I checked, I think we had 11,193 people here. And I told you, I think there were 21 behavioral health groups the last time, but I was wrong. There are 43.
Which is just nuts that small of a town has 43 different practices, and that you've been able to scale to the size that you have.
Yeah, I think just, I knew that there were not 43 when I started, but there were a lot. So just knowing what's out there and knowing what those practices take and knowing what their why is, what are they focusing on? Looking at financials. When I started Mindsight, I literally had $600 and that was it. I had nothing. So I had to figure out how to do it myself. And I'm thankful for that now. But, I was just thinking yesterday evening, if I would have had a Joe or an Allison that I could have had access to, it would have saved me a ton of time and a ton of headache. But just knowing what your finances are and knowing where you're willing to spend money, and then where you're going to have to just get your hands dirty and figure it out yourself. That's a good place to start in the planning.
Now, do you recommend people set aside a certain amount of time each week when they're in the planning phase to really get things done? Or how do you recommend they do their time management around the planning phase?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think trying to take on too much too quickly can be very overwhelming and discouraging. So just setting aside some time, and really not just time, but energy. I had one group practice owner, Amy Parks. She was asking me, how do you determine what to spend your energy on? How do you let that, what do you do? How do you determine that? And I think it's just looking at what you're passionate about, and especially scheduling the time to address the areas that you are not passionate about, because the areas that you are passionate about usually come out in more creative, free-flowing ways. And so scheduling time to do the things that you don't really love to do, I think, is probably a good idea.
Yeah. And I mean, thinking about how you went from $600 to $1 million plus practice in 3 years, like what's a realistic amount of time someone should put in each week to working on the practice if they want to pace themselves similar to you?
For the planning phase, I really feel like knowing the right questions that you need to be looking at, I think someone could get through a planning phase in less than 30 days easily if they just knew what they were supposed to be looking at.
Okay. So like when we do the mastermind group, it's going to be, you're going to kind of give those questions and then people can work on it, come back and check in. And okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
What are a couple of those questions that for sure people need to ask themselves?
I'll just go down my list really quickly. Looking at models, and at that point in the planning phase, you might not really know what model that you want your company to have. You may not be happy with the model that you currently have, but knowing how you want to do that, knowing what your target population would be and your target client, I think is huge. What are your company's non-negotiables? What will you not change? Those are really important, not only for me to know in a consultant role, but just for you to know as a practice owner, because you have to know what those are and be very, very clear on what those are. So those would be a couple. And then looking at a scaling side, just knowing what's out there, knowing what insurances and panels you can get on, getting those fee schedules, just having that basic information so that we can then move on to running numbers and making sure that what your plans are going to match the $1 million or whatever it is, whatever financial goal that you have.
Awesome. Anything we didn't cover from the planning phase that you want to make sure we hit on?
No, the rest of it's really just more supportive, follow-up questions and details. But that's a gist of it.
Well, in tomorrow's podcast, we're going to cover process, all those systems. And so we already covered purpose, planning, and tomorrow's process. Again, if you want to join me and Kasey in our $1 million practice mastermind group. So if you've got your insurance set up, if you've got your NPI going and you've got a little bit of traction and you're ready to really scale quickly, we would love to have you in it. It's going to include a 2-day visit to Kasey's practice, 2 days with me here in Traverse City, Michigan. Each month, you're going to get 2 90-minute mastermind calls where Kasey's going to cover some content for 45 minutes, and then we're going to have 2 hot seats. We're going to have an hour Q&A with me once a month. We're going to have only 12 people that are in this. We're going to have the Facebook group, the texting, phone support with Kasey. And then I forgot to tell them last time that you have your everything package, which is going to be all the systems that Kasey uses for her practice so that you're able to just have her everything package. And so if you want to apply for that, it's over at practiceofthepractice.com/apply. We're taking applications now, and that's going to kick off in early July. And it's going to be on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Tuesdays of the month. So we're really excited to be doing this together. Thanks for letting us into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day.